Hello, everyone, and welcome to our very special webinar on the success story of school transport services on integrating PTV Route Optimiser. We are advertising our upcoming webinars on our LinkedIn page, PTV Group IMEA. Therefore, we invite you to follow our page. Allow me to introduce your PTV team for this webinar. Our South African Managing Director, Charles Chickerling. I would also like to introduce our guest, Hina Sheikh, Head of Planning and Performance in School Transport Services, and she will share with us today how PTV Route Optimiser successfully increased their routing consistency and road safety. And myself, your moderator, Majd. Note that the webinar will last for 50 to 55 minutes. In case you have any questions, we encourage you to type in the question box during the presentation, and we will address all your questions in the dedicated Q&A session. Now I'll hand it on to Charles for a brief introduction.
Good morning, good afternoon. I think we've got people from all over the world that's joining us today. So for some of us, it's good morning, some is afternoon. So thank you very much for joining us. We certainly look forward to have you with us and to join us in today's activities. Sorry, let me just try and get the process going properly. Okay, first of all, just the agenda in terms of what we're going to do today. Firstly, I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview of PTV itself, the company, in terms of where we are and how we came to where we are today. I'm just going to talk on a few little theory issues around the objectives of route optimization. The actual overview of route optimization principles and policies. We're going to share a few examples with you, just some benefits or potential benefits that people could experience by using some of these technologies in their own operations. And then I'm going to hand over to Hina to go through the practical case study of the STS experience. I'm not going to say too much about that at this point in time. She will do the introduction and give you a full rundown of their business and how they operate and how the whole project panned out from the beginning. Then at the end, we're going to allow for questions and answers. So if you look on the control panel in front of you, you'll see down the line there's an option that says questions. So please, while we're busy with the presentations, don't hesitate, start putting your questions in. That will give us time even during the presentation to make sure that we have the answers ready. So we will then at the end of the session, once Hina is finished, we will discuss any of the questions that you have raised in the actual presentation or during the presentation itself. So please feel free to do that as we go along. Okay, firstly, just to give you a little bit of background about PTV itself. PTV, the business started about 40 years ago in Germany, in a town called Karlsruhe. So we're 40 years, I think 2 years ago we were 40 years old. Currently we have over 800 employees. We've got offices throughout the world on every single continent. We have our annual turnover as well in excess of 100 million euros per annum. We also recently have been taken over by Porsche SE, which is the holding company of the investment company Porsche. So we are part of the whole Porsche group with the different sister companies being Volkswagen and all the others relating to that. So we're part of a massive corporate environment. So firstly, let me just take you through some of our products in terms of the main emphasis today is on the route optimization and scheduling. So typically the first product that I would like to share some information with you is the PTV Route Optimiser. We have two options there. We've got a cloud version as well as the on-premise version. In this specific case study today, STS uses our on-premise version. Another additional add-on product, we call it PTV Drive and Arrive, which is basically a ETA notification type system. So once we've planned the routes in the Route Optimiser, we pass it on or publish it to the driver app, which allows us to be able to give estimated time of arrival notifications to the clients, which makes it fairly visible in terms of expectations, and it gives the opportunity for the receiver of the goods to prepare and make sure they are ready for the delivery. PTV Map and Guide is mainly a system that's designed for the longer distance trucking operations, especially in Europe, where it gives you the opportunity to cost a specific trip. It will give you a calculation regarding the distances. It takes toll fees into account. It takes the truck restrictions in terms of narrow roads and low bridges. So all that type of functionality is available to the user to allow them to do a proper analysis of different route options, to allow them to do quotes or just to manage the route as part of the day-to-day operations. Together with that, there's a PTV Navigator, which is also installed on the driver app or on the driver device, which navigates. It works the same as a typical Garmin or TomTom navigator. The difference here is that it is a truck navigator, and it allows, again, for similar to what functionality we have in Map and Guide, it will navigate and avoid certain restrictions where vehicles of a certain size and type cannot go. Unfortunately, the functionality for that is a little bit restricted in certain areas, the whole of Europe and the Americas. Some other areas we don't have that functionality in terms of maps, but that is something that we're working towards. Map and Market is mainly a tool for the mobile workforce, as well as allowing the user to do depot location modeling, optimizing the logistic network through various technologies that we use. And then the last product is the PTV X server, which is a tool set that we provide to customers, or mainly third-party product developers, to allow them to use some of our functionalities and algorithms via API technology to enhance their own products as well. So that's fairly specialized in the technical field, but it allows you to take some of our functionalities in our existing software to incorporate that into your own. Now, when we talk about route planning and scheduling optimization, there are quite a few objectives that we try to achieve. And one of the first ones is probably to reduce kilometers traveled. In most cases, the emphasis of users of our software do that to assist in saving money, and the less kilometers we travel, the less the costs, obviously. So a second factor is also to reduce the number of resources that we require, or the resources that we use in our operations, and that obviously has a further impact, especially when it comes to the fixed cost component of our expenditure at the end of the day. We try to reduce daily overtime. Quite often with ineffective or bad planning, we end up with drivers taking much more time than necessary, and that adds to the wage bill in terms of additional overtime costs. Quite often we find that certain of our users indicate that the most important aspect of using proper planning and optimization is to improve customer service or to improve the customer experience, and not everything is not always related to the reduction of costs. And in many cases, especially where there's fierce competition, quite often we find that people use the system to make sure that they improve their customer experience and to be a step ahead of the competitor instead of really worrying about additional costs as such. the optimization of fleet size and the configuration of what types of vehicles need to be used. You know, we quite often find that operations traditionally would buy the same type vehicle year in and year out. And this system allows us to analyze and to re-look at what we really need in terms of resources with regards to the types of vehicles that we do need and what that we really need to deploy in our operations. Same with depot locations. We often, especially in times where things change drastically, like we had last year with COVID, people have to rethink their whole operation quite often. And that might be the necessity to have a look at reducing a number of depots. It might be to increase our customer service output and add additional depots. So functionality within our software allows us to optimize the depot location. So in terms of our customer footprint, we can then ascertain if we add additional depots, where those depots should be located, or the reverse, if we reduce depots, what would the impact be on cost? Because typically what happens is the more depots you have, the lower your transport cost and the fewer vehicles you require. But we need to be able to do a trade-off analysis to see what is the impact of savings on transport and vehicles compared to the additional costs or the reduction of cost of overheads of running a depot. And then in everybody's mind is always the increased productivity issue that we try to implement as far as we can. Now, the software that is designed serves many different industries itself. Now, the typical and the most common one of our target market is the typical multi-drop distribution type operations. And there we include FMCG, industrial, 3PLs, 4PLs. The system is quite well adapted to service the courier industry for deliveries and collections. The mobile workforce, where we talk about field services, maintenance teams, sales teams, and basically the principles are exactly the same as a delivery operation. The only real difference is that instead of the capacity of vehicles, where we load a vehicle with a number of crates or pallets or tons or cubes, in a mobile workforce environment, the limitation factor is obviously time. Now, each activity is allocated a certain amount of time, which will allow us to plan activities of the number of the number of tasks that can be performed by a mobile workforce. Passenger transport, as we will see today, in terms of the educational services, where there are bus routes or bus collection and delivery routes for students to schools, to universities. Mining operations, where there are, for instance, compounds or places or hostels wherever the workers are centralized, and the delivery of workers to their place of work. Municipal bus services, mainly in a fixed route type environment, obviously is a typical user of our software as well. The e-commerce, I think with COVID specifically, that has absolutely boomed. Because of closure of certain facilities. The e-commerce side has grown in the last year in leaps and bounds, and typically the e-commerce success depends on the logistics operational side of things. If the easy part is to generate or to create websites and purchase sites, e-commerce activities, but if you cannot deliver the goods on time when it was promised and reliably to our customers, that whole operation would fail. Then we use the software quite extensively in consulting exercises, where we assist our clients with fleet profiling and sizing, as indicated before, to make sure that we optimize the core fleet. How many vehicles should we have in operation? What should the configuration and sizes be? To make sure that we do it as economically as possible. I did mention the depot location modeling, and quite often, especially with 3PLs, they use the software to simulate the operations that they tender for. So that assists us to assist our clients to put tender pricing and contract negotiations in place in that whole process. And then the last one, obviously, development partners, as I mentioned earlier, mainly using the X-server components to build in additional functionality within their operations. Now, there are different ways. We often find that the operations with fixed routes, sequence optimization within zones, dynamic routing, dedicated days of delivery, frequency scheduling in terms of sales calls and so on. So there are various different types of industries that we service with different types of dynamics in terms of how we put a solution together. Very quickly, in terms of different route planning policies, we often find that people have different policies that they adhere to. The first one that I want to mention is the operation would go to the furthest delivery first. Now, the logic behind that is that if you work yourself back towards the depot and you might miss a client or two, it's relatively close to the depot, so you can service that client on the next day fairly easily. The alternative is to go to the nearest delivery first. Now, the logic behind that is you start offloading the truck quicker, it becomes lighter, therefore cheaper to run, which again makes sense, but we need to look at what the impact of those decisions are. Quite a popular exercise is for drivers to decide the sequence of their deliveries themselves. The logic is that the drivers know the areas best, and they would know when or how the sequence of delivery should take place. And then the fourth option is when it's done through a systemized process, as we have within our software itself. Now, the first one, I just want to show you a little bit of stats. So this is where the depot is located. So the furthest delivery first. So we go to the delivery 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, back to the depot. And we've done some of the stats. I'll show you a summary of that just now. Second option is the closest delivery. So we've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And that way around. Again, we've got the analysis of the stats. This is when we told the driver to do it themselves, and he selected 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and the rest to complete the whole process. And then obviously the last one is a system optimized one, and you will find specifically that the system will have a circular type pattern and very little crisscrossing or no crisscrossing. And that's typically the first place where you will see that the moment there is crisscrossing, you would know that there is wastage. Now, within that environment, this is just some statistical analysis. I'm not going to go into all the detail. I don't want to take too much time of Hina, but this was just a summary of the statistics. 16 deliveries, 1 route. There's the total hours in terms of the furthest client first, 7 hours 52, 721, 730 versus 631, 637. If we look at the kilometers traveled, 118, 98, 104, and 68. So this is just the analysis of the different percentage differences between the different options. So there's the furthest client first versus the optimized route. If you look at the vast differences in kilometers, for instance, which will have a direct impact on running cost, obviously, as well. And the same with the nearest client first versus the optimized route, and so on. So these sort of, it's a bit of a theoretical exercise, but at least it gives you an opportunity to understand what the impact of certain policies are and how that could impact the actual cost of the operation. Now, just quickly, some of the typical benefits that we experience by deploying our software. We typically looking at about 10%, but often quite extensive. You know, we have quite huge savings in some operations, depending on each scenario, obviously, as well. the environmental benefits in terms of reducing the carbon footprint, which is also taken into account when we do the planning. Improve customer service. Your customer knows when he gets his deliveries, and especially with the notification services, that gives us the proper customer communication that we require. Improved management control, where we link the sales processes with warehouse and TMS and transport systems, the information flow, the improved reporting through KPI management, and then obviously a big factor at the last line is where we quite often find that there are certain key people in operations that has all the planning skills in their heads, and the moment somebody of that sort of nature disappear, the whole thing falls flat. So at least once a system is deployed, it makes it easier to work, to have more than one person forming part of that key operation. Okay, that is me for now. I'm going to hand over now to Hina to carry on with their experience relating to, I missed the last slide. This is just an example of one of our clients or case study of specific achievements that we had relating to a specific customer. After the first year of operation, we reduced the headcount by 20 people from 381 to 361. The fleet size reduced by 12.7%. Our in full on-time customer delivery matrix went up from 67 to 98%. Total kilometers saved in the first year was 480,000 kilometers, 10.9%. And then the utilization capacity of the loading capacity of the vehicles increased from 30 to 70%. The interesting factor is that during that year, the business actually grew by 39%. So all these reduced resources that we used also allowed us to cater for nearly 40% of additional business and work that was performed. Some of the intangible benefits, it is difficult to measure and quantify. Over time, the internal controls, the improvement of management to measure the actual versus planned, performance reporting via KPIs, and then obviously productivity management measurement is quite often very difficult to do and report that in specific monetary terms as such. So this is just in closing from my side, just to give you an indication of some of the results that we have been able to realize with our client base. As I said, I'll say it again, I'll hand over to Hina now to take over the presentation from here. Thank you. But I'll be available afterwards. If there's any questions, please remember to state your questions in the control panel, and we will address it at the end of the session.
Thank you, Cheryl. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Hina Sheikh, and I'm the Head of Performance and Planning here at School Transport Services. We are based out of UAE, and we have our school transport system, which is a major part of our bus operations, operating across all 7 Emirates. Just to give you a brief about School Transport Service, we have been in business for more than 10 years now, and we are the largest private school transport providers in UAE. On an average, we transport around 80,000 plus students on a daily basis to and from school. Apart from this, we are also into white bus business, which is mainly a contract business. We transport staff. We are into tourism as well. But of course, the base is always the school transport service and transporting of students. Now, how we have been able to derive benefits out of the Route Optimiser that PTV provided us. I will just like to take you through what it was before. I would like to take you through the journey of how it is now with automation in place. So earlier, our main dependencies or our main route management used to happen on maybe pen and paper or on Excel sheets. And this was basically through the expertise of our drivers. Our dependency on their experience and their expertise was very, very high. There was very little scope of challenging as well, because of course they knew the routes better, they knew the roads better. Now, all this, since it was done manually, obviously the records and keeping governance on us was also very difficult. We were not able to get in as many efficiencies as we would have liked to, because the whole process was manual. Now, moving on to what a typical school transport service looks at. It is very difficult to do planning for school transport because it's different. It is different from logistics. It's different from point-to-point carrying of goods. What we carry are really precious goods. We carry students, and our focus is very highly on being smart, on being timely, on being safe above all. Now, in terms of being smart, which is also one of our goals, we bought in the software, PTV software, Route Optimiser. Marge, can you help me with the next slide, please? Now, the constraints that we have put in, the constraints that we face on a daily basis when we do planning for school transport, is that we have to look at the distance that a child travels on a daily basis, the journey time of that child on the school transport, the arrival time at school, the student pickup points, the areas that they are traveling, and also that they obviously reach on time. We also consider the kind of roads that a child takes, whether they're taking highways, whether they're taking roads with speeds of 40 kilometers or 50 kilometers. Of course, we have a cap of 80 kilometers per hour for our school buses. So while managing all this and also managing the routes and doing all of this on a manual basis, making routes of more than 3,000 buses, and specifically when a term starts, was becoming a very challenging task for us. Thankfully, after the Route Optimizer software was brought into place, now things have changed. One of the major things that has changed is that we've been able to get more efficiency. We've been able to change the mindset of our people, wherein they used to think, yes, this is the only way of doing things. They had a very fixed mindset. We've been able to broaden that part of it. They now understand the software. They understand the efficiencies that the software can get, which a manual planning cannot. Also, the amount of work that goes on in terms of school transport, the amount of students who come in, specifically when an academic year starts. So for us, a start of an academic year is our peak time, which means there are 80,000 students enrolling. There are some who are discontinuing. Most of them are getting added to the routes, then planning those routes out and ensuring that we do all this way ahead in time, and we inform our parents so they have the comfort of knowing exactly when their child is going to be picked up, at what time the child is going to be back, and what is the journey time for that child. So all this has been made possible, and we've been able to bring in efficiencies because of the Route Optimizer. Now, the parameters that we put in when how we use it for the school transport is that we put in the geocodes of all these students into our system, into our software. We fill in the constraints that you can see on the screen. We fill in the constraints on the PTV Optimizer, and we run the routes. Now, PTV will give us the most optimized route that they think is possible. There is very little amount of manual work also that goes on, which is mostly a planner's expertise once the route is planned. And since our planners know the area, they know the Emirates, they know what works, this really helps us. This supports them in terms of giving out the best amount of buses that are required. For us, buses are obviously our biggest expense, and any saving on the bus will result in a direct saving to us. Now, savings in the bus will also mean saving of drivers and all the other additional costs like fuel, tolls, permits that you have when you travel within Emirates. This also helps us in reducing the driving time for our drivers. So our drivers are not too fatigued. They are traveling on the best optimized route, and they are not consuming a lot of dead miles. Earlier also, we used to not be able to understand exactly how much kilometers are wasted or how much of dead miles were taking place when we were doing manual planning. However, now we are able to compare the earlier manual routes to the most optimized routes, and we are able to understand the dead miles and the costs that we were incurring at that point in time. The other way of helping us out, apart from school transport, was that by demonstrating our efficiencies in the school business, we were also able to widen our scope of business in the travel and the tourism sector. So PTV has helped us a lot from that perspective. It's also helped us to understand when we have a new school coming in, for us it's a new contract, and you have the number of students that the school says we traveling by transport. We are able to give them the best possible price, because we understand through our optimizer that these are the buses that we will be using, and hence this is the price that we should quote maybe. So it's helped us in a lot of different ways. Marge, if you can just move on to the next slide. Now, some of the benefits that we have seen by using Route Optimizer, we've been using it, by the way, for more than 1.5 years now. And it has shown efficiencies right from the beginning when we were in a BAU transport business. Today, it's COVID times, and it has helped us immensely during this time. Actually, we very extensively used the software during COVID, because this was a different type of challenge for us. To take you through the benefits that we faced in a normal scenario was, of course, the customer satisfaction. As a parent, I wouldn't want my child to be on the bus for too long. So if you have the most efficient route planned, your child is traveling for lesser time, and obviously you have a satisfied parent who would, then encourage other parents to join the transport. Reduction in dead miles, as we mentioned earlier, and of course the reduction in OPEX and even CAPEX cost. By putting the PTV software into our systems, we've also been able to do a lot of good time management. And when we say time management, it's not only of the drivers, but time management, the amount of time that was wasted earlier by doing the manual planning. So we've been able to bring in those efficiencies. Of course, there has been improvement in communication, our communication with parents as well. Like I mentioned, we are able to tell them exactly how much time their child will take to travel on the bus. And this we have also integrated with our STS app. So, we are able to do a tracking of child as well. The parent can see how much time a child is taking, at what point he boards the bus, and at what point he gets to his destination. Then, of course, there are efficiencies in terms of being environment friendly. Every saving in a bus will lead to a saving, and a saving in terms of money as well as lesser carbon footprint on this planet. So yes, that is the efficiencies that we have brought in. For us, daily planning has now become a little bit of a challenge, and we are very glad that we have the navigator or the PTV Route Optimiser with us. Now, how it has helped us in the COVID scenario is, due to COVID, of course, every region has been impacted. Every country has been impacted. In our region, thankfully, the schools have given the liberty to the parents to decide whether, they want to send their children for a face-to-face learning or for online learning. Now, of course, there are restrictions around that as well. There are restrictions around bus capacity, which is one thing that has helped us immensely during COVID. The regulatory authorities have decreased our bus capacity from 100% to 50%. That means lesser students on the bus, and that eventually means more buses on the road. So if we do not have efficient routes, this will have a huge impact on us. Apart from that, there is the dynamic rostering of the children. So there are different standards and different grades of kids who are traveling on a Monday, who are traveling on a Tuesday, are completely different routes. So for our drivers to manage the routes as well as to try to optimize would have been a big challenge if we didn't have the software around. So right now our planners are almost doing weekly plannings for these schools. There are some schools who work once a week and then they are shut for 2 weeks and then they open again in the 4th week. So this type of dynamic planning, and we are catering to 80 plus schools across the UAE. So we have buses in Fujairah, we have buses in Al Ain, in Abu Dhabi, of course most of the buses in Dubai, in Sharjah. And every emirate has a different regulation, not just in the COVID scenario, but otherwise as well. They have different scenarios of speed limits. They have different regulations on speed limit. So different regulations on seat capacity as well. So when you have a software, it actually lowers down your anxiety levels also, because you are able to immediately make those changes to your operations and you don't have to wait too long and do a lot of manual work. And hence, our customer satisfaction has also gone higher, because all these changes that are happening on a daily basis, we've been able to cater to each and every one of them. And we've been able to have happy customers. So overall, PTV has helped not only school transport, they've helped on our other businesses as well. And we really appreciate all the efficiencies that we've been able to get in through PTV. And I would want to really thank the PTV team. I would like to thank all of the audience in this webinar. That's thank you from me then. Have a good day. Marj, over to you.
Thanks, Hina. There was a question from Claudio Kastner that we want to address directly to you, if you don't mind. His question is if you are using the Route Optimiser for your coach charter as well, the intercity transfers, and so on. Can you maybe just respond to that, please?
Yes, we are using our transport system for intercity transport as well. Depends on whether that emirate is open to take in transport from another city.
Has that got to do with specific permits and so on as well?
Yes, of course. Every emirate has a permit, and I'm talking about a normal scenario. Every emirate has a permit, and like I said, they have different guidelines on the road speeds and the regulation. So we do have all our school buses. Like if, as an example, if I am living in Sharjah Emirate of UAE, and I would like my child to travel to Dubai, so yes, the school transport caters to that, as well as the tourism transport caters to that. We just have to plug in these scenarios on the software. For example, the Emirate of Dubai might have a speed limit of say 90 kilometers per hour, and the Emirates of Abu Dhabi might have 100. So we have to fill in these parameters on the software and then run the simulations. Once you run the simulations, then of course it gives you the best and the most optimized route.
Okay. Good. Are there any other questions for Hina? There's a couple of questions on the Route Optimiser side that I will answer, but are there any other questions relating to passenger or school transport services specifically? If not, then I'll just address we have two questions, one from Mirko Venker and Bjorn Straat. So if there's nothing else, let's go to Mirko first. He asked, does the Route Optimiser actually also schedule the drivers, and can a distinction be made between one or two drivers? Now, within the parameters of the software, we specify what the legislative issues are around driving times and rest breaks and so on. So typically we would plan a route, and that will be used then to indicate whether we will apply one or two drivers in the process. There's a little bit of a difference between the the on-premise version that allows us to schedule drivers as well, where the cloud version is a little bit limited in terms of that capability, but we certainly can address both those issues specifically in that regard. Bjorn asks, you mentioned the optimization of fleet size and configuration. In what product is this feature? Is this something you would do with historical data, or is this more during the creation of the routes? Now, there are a couple of options that we can apply here. The first one is the functionality, especially the cloud version of the software, has the functionality to first import all the actual volumes of the deliveries to be done, as well as the location of each delivery point or collection point. And then we have the option to run it with a fixed fleet, which means that for every single vehicle type that we have, we would then indicate how many of each of these vehicle types we have available. So that will typically be used in a dynamic or a fixed route planning scenario. The alternative then is to work with a virtual fleet, where we would then not indicate any quantities of vehicles, but based on the orders and the volumes of the orders, because the system obviously takes capacity of vehicles into consideration, the system will then advise and indicate to you the result would be then how many of each vehicle type you need to perform the delivery or the collection operation. We often use that also in a situation where companies use a lot of contracted in transport. So first of all, the first run of the planning we would do with a fixed fleet, where we will identify which vehicles we have available in our own fleet. So we try to optimize the usage of our own fleet first, and then with the remaining orders that could not be fitted to the existing fleet, we would then do another run, and based on a virtual fleet, that will give us an indication of what types of vehicles we need to hire in and the quantities of each type that we would need to fulfill the delivery of the orders then for the next day. So there are a couple of options, that a couple of ways of doing it, and we can really play around with that. And that's typically where we use that in the situation where with consulting services and so on as well. Okay, does that answer your questions? Mirko says yes, and they use X-Tour service in the cloud. That's good to know. I assume you developed that as functionality within your own products. X-Tour, just for the others that might not know, is one of the X-Server components that handles the optimization side of things. So that's typically an example of users or clients that use some of our components in the enhancement of their own developed software. Bjorn, does that answer your question? Okay, are there any others? Let me just try and keep track here. Do you have APIs in order to connect to existing ERP systems? Yes, we do. Again, a bit of a different way of operating with the on-premise version. The on-premise version, we've got sort of a preprocessor or exchange database or middleware that sits between the ERP and our software. On the cloud version, we have APIs, so we can draw information from an ERP through APIs. The results of the routes can also be extracted via APIs if you need to incorporate that into other software. The typical traditional way is to do the transfer via normal Excel or CSV files as well. So there are various ways of integration in and out of our software. So it all depends on the situation and a specific environment of the client. So we would cater for the needs as and when they arise. Okay. March, you must help me if I miss any questions that I did not answer. Are there anything else that we need to address?
I think there are no questions in the question box, but just a reminder, recording of today's webinar will be in a follow-up email, and you'll be able to go back and have a look at the session later. And in case there are any further questions, please contact us on sales.imea@ptvgroup.com. I think that's it. Thank you all for joining us. Yeah.
Okay, maybe we
Are
must
there
just,
any other questions?
we've got a few minutes left, so if there's any other questions, please feel free, or otherwise, as Marge has indicated, you can send the questions directly by email. And if there's anybody that requires, as I indicated, the visitors or the attendees are sort of well represented all over the world. I indicated that we've got offices on every single continent, so if there's any need for us to organize a demonstration of the software, we can certainly give you the contact details of the closest operation, but please feel free to communicate via email or phone calls. Our website's got all the contact details as well, so please make use of that. Okay, it does not seem that there's any other questions. So from my side, and to Hina specifically as well, thank you very much for your participation in this webinar. We really appreciate you as a client, and we look forward to a long relationship with you guys in the region. To the rest of our clients and maybe clients or would-be or prospective clients that participated, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time that you put aside for us to present this webinar. Over to you, March.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Hina. Thank you for everyone who attended this webinar. And looking forward to seeing you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.